Back in elementary school, on the first day of class, came with the same ritual, the All About Me worksheet. It was a small slip of paper where my friends and I were expected to sum up our entire existence so the teacher could get to know us better. It asked questions like, what's your favorite movie? Or list 3 fun facts about yourself. Simple, right? But when my third grade teacher, Miss Dean, called up a volunteer to pass them out, I was already bracing myself to think the hardest my 8-year-old brain could. You see, on the surface, the assignment was straightforward, but in reality, it demanded something much greater from me. To summarize my entire life, my interests, preferences, and unique quirks, all before the bell rang. Now, I knew I was probably taking this too seriously, and my responses weren't going to change anything. But Miss Dean, if you're asking me to pick between Kung Fu Panda, Magic School Bus, or the Toy Story, the 3 greatest cinemas in the modern age, you have to give me more time. What I wanted to do was write out a well-thought-out explanation, detailing my reasonings for each. What actually ended up happening? I spent too much time on the first question that by the time I looked back up at the clock, I had 90 seconds remaining. I had no choice but to scribble down the most generic and uninspired answers ever. Every year I would receive the same assignment, and every year I would fail to write, well, all about me. And looking back, it wasn't just an elementary school assignment. It's a glimpse into challenge we all face, even as we grow up. Think about your own experience. Many of you have or will have to present on a long-term project, push for a promotion, write a college application, or even pitch a business. In these cases, you have to package years of work and passion into just a few minutes of speaking. So how do you decide what stays in and goes out without losing the essence of what makes your work so special? Well, I can tell you right now, the science behind it really isn't that complicated. And by the end of this talk, I'll teach you how to do it. My name is Krishna Bhatt, and my favorite hobbies are reading, hiking, and sometimes playing video games. So now that I've officially doubled my age since 3rd grade, I would say I've learned a lot. I've run for student council, I've given too many school projects presentations to remember, and even gave a TED Talk last year. But more importantly than all of that, I've spent the last 5 years competing in science fair. To those unfamiliar, science fairs are much more than volcano models and potato clocks. Science fairs are special because they challenge us to take everything we learn from school to create something entirely new. From coming up with a project idea to creating and testing the final design. Science fairs are a special recipe that can create some pretty crazy results. These are a couple of projects my friends and my competitors and I have made over the years. However, what makes science fair even more special is after months of refining, testing, and researching, the fate of the entire project comes down to just one day of presentation. Every March, hundreds of students and I take our trifold poster boards to the convention hall to be interviewed in front of a panel of judges. Then after just 10 critical minutes, they decide the success of an entire year's worth of effort. Stressful, right? Well, I've fallen in love with the engineering process, but I've had too many interviews that have gone badly to keep count of. I remember in my first year in 6th grade, I was extremely nervous talking to the judges. I kept stumbling over my words and kept rambling on about niche parts of my project, only for the judges to lose focus. And worst of all, when I looked up, I only found blank stares, which is when I realized that my explanation hadn't clicked at all. That year, I performed poorly in terms of awards, but what I soon learned is that it didn't matter how innovative or effective my project was if I couldn't pass the first hurdle, explaining it to a judge clearly, quickly, and convincingly. So entering the 7th grade, I was even more nervous than the last year because I knew how much was at stake. But this time, instead of just going ahead and setting up my trifold poster as normal, I took a moment to see how the high school winners were presenting. And as I watched various people present, I noticed they all had a couple of things in common. They weren't as focused on their end results as much as their journey. And instead of getting bogged down in the irrelevant intricacies of the project, they focused more and elaborated on what was needed for the judge's understanding. So I took note of this, and over the years I've used it to distill the process of giving a pitch into 3 crucial steps. And if you use these steps before walking into any of your presentations, be that pitch, interview, or proposal, you can find that it makes it much more concise, yet much more powerful. The framework is simple, effective, and actually quite easy to remember because it spells out CAP. So let's start at the top here. The first thing you have to do before entering any pitch is to contextualize. And what this means is to understand your audience, because the biggest mistake in pitching is focusing too much on yourself. I used to struggle with this a lot. I used to drown myself in questions. Am I speaking smoothly? Did I include all the details? Am I making a good impression? But the fact is that great communicators can flip the perspective outwards. Instead of focusing on yourself, focus on your audience. Ask yourself who you're speaking to, what they care about, what mindset they're bringing into the room. For instance, science fair students often believe that judges want flawless results. College applicants sometimes think that perfect grades will guarantee an acceptance. However, the truth is that colleges and judges appreciate effort, potential, and creativity. Similarly, if you can identify what your audience is really looking for, you could tailor your message to maximize your time. The next step is to clearly define your aims. Because with limited time, every moment of your pitch should be balanced and aligned with what you want to achieve and what the audience values. Starting off with your bigger goal, break it down into clear and actionable steps. This way, you could go through and check that every step along the way is marked off as you complete your pitch. For instance, if you're presenting a business, you might write that you want to first of all show the demand for the business before explaining its viability, and finally going on to provide irresistible reasons to invest. And finally, the third option and the third step, and this is the most important, is to teach how you deliver your information to the audience. And often the most effective way of doing this is through stories. As you probably know, people don't connect well with stats and figures. Instead, they connect with stories of other people. So this is the same reason why a child's natural reaction is to sit up when you say once upon a time, or why blockbuster movies still stick to that classic hero's journey. However, when you teach with stories, you have to keep in mind that the lows are almost as important as the highs. Don't gloss over flaws in your project, because the audience will definitely notice. Instead, of acknowledge them and address them confidently. This builds credibility. So back in 7th grade, these were the 3 main steps that I saw high school winners were taking when presenting their projects. They contextualized the situation, clearly defined aims, and taught the judges about their stories. And I thought, and before entering judging, I thought a few minutes about these, but it immediately showed its effects. That year, I performed much better than any previous year, and even qualified for states for the first time. And as I continued to refine this process, I began to work my way up, starting from the middle school cafeteria, and eventually presenting at the White House. Yes, the White House. And this year, I began mentoring middle schoolers about the same process, and I teach them the same thing, that it doesn't matter how innovative of an idea you have, how much of a breakthrough of your research is. If you couldn't surpass the first hurdle and explain it clearly, quickly, and convincingly to the judges. So the next time you have something important to present, whether it's a pitch, interview, or proposal, think about the CAT structure. Contextualize your audience, set clear aims, and teach with stories. And if we can all learn to communicate our ideas effectively, we would live in a world where no idea is misunderstood and hard work comes to fruition. Thank you.